Hey everyone, it's Colin with Legalized Mischief Productions. Thank you for joining me and welcome. This is a third part of the step-by-step tutorial series on how to paint Iron Hands Space Marines. Today we're going to finish detailing the model. We're going to do the green eye lenses, the white bolter casing, and a quick black leather on the pouches. And then in step 4 we'll do the transfer and the oil wash and finish up the model. So we're near the end. And I'm excited to finish this guy up. So first things first, we are going to knock out the eye lenses. And for the eye lenses, I'll be using P3 Gnarls green, P3 Wurm green, yellow green from Vallejo model color, and as well as a black green ink from gaming, from Vallejo as well. This is one of those cases where the exact colors aren't necessarily super important. I think yellow-green is really important because this is a really strong highlight for the bottom of the lens. But you do want a nice emerald green. You don't want a really desaturated green. You want a really nice emerald green for these eye lenses because they are going to be such a focus on the model. There really isn't a lot of color, obviously, to the Iron Hands scheme. So you want these eyes to be really, really strong. And the nice thing about painting this Mark III armor is that those eye lenses are recessed in there, really well defined. So it's pretty easy to just get in there. Excuse me, really easy to just get in there and outline those real quick. We want to be careful not to get paint on the helmet, on the front of the helmet there, because we did do that ink. It is hard to go back. It does make it a little harder to go back and do touch-ups because of that ink glaze that we did over the model. So a little bit of that Gnarls green, and then we're going to go in with the Wurm green, the middle green. And you can use like orc flesh tones for this. Orc and goblin flesh tones for this work really well. I like these colors from P3 a lot, but if you have like equivalent kind of orky colors in GW, then those will work just fine. But you want to make sure that they're a true emerald green. Now we're going to go in with this black green ink and just go over the whole lens just to give it a nice definition around the eye lens, as you can see there. And then while that's drying, because we want to keep moving, while that's drying, we're just going to go real quick and base coat. Go real quick and just base coat these pouches in a flat black. I use Vallejo model color black. It's just a really nice matte flat black. I'm choosing to do these pouches black because with Iron Hands, there's so little color on the models in general that if I were to do like a brown leather or a reddish leather, those would really stand out way too much. But by doing them black, we'll still define them. They'll still be there, obviously, but it won't be like, if these were painted red or brown leather, you'd see them from across the table. You see the pouches from across the table, and we don't want that. So that wash is probably dried now. So we'll go in with that Wurm green, and we'll paint it. We just want that little crescent on the front. And again, I'm resting the model on the table. I'm holding the model. I'm pinching the base to keep it tight in my hand. The whole back of the model is resting on my back fingers. I'm resting my front fingers on the table so that this whole thing just doesn't move. And then I just extend the brush and very lightly. And again, if that isn't coming off, just pull back and go back and refresh the brush, get some more paint on there, get everything set back up. This is not something that you want to rush. So get set back up, everything holding steady. And very gently work that Wurm green on there, and I actually did it a little too much there. I got a little bit on the side. I didn't get as far forward as I wanted. So that's okay. It's not great. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back and we're going to get a little bit of that black green ink and just reestablish on the front there. Reestablish that break between the front of the, there we go, between the front of the lens. So you can see there we reestablished the line between the lens and the helmet because we did go a little bit overboard, and I did hit the side of the helmet a little bit with that Wurm green, and that's not what I want at all. So this lens is easier to get at if I turn the model upside down because I'm right-handed. So I'll just balance the model on my fingers, put my hand on the table, and then all I have to do is extend the brush. This is drying very quickly on the edge of, on the end of my brush here. There we go. Perfect. So that's good. I like that. That turned out. You see there, it turned out nicely. And this yellow green is a really, strong, very, very, very strong color. So I'm just refreshing a little bit more intensity on that lens there. There we go. This yellow green is incredibly strong color, so we're just going to want just a little tiny bit of this in that lens. I love it. It's a great color, but you want to use it very, very sparingly. You can see just how bright this color. I mean, it's like neon yellow. So you want to use that very sparingly. And we're just going to go in and very lightly touch the front of that lens. Same thing here. And we get some nice. Now, if you want to get a little bit of glow going from the eyes, you can go down with a thinned down Wurm green and very lightly glaze around the eye socket there. But be sure to stay just right on the edge of the helmet there. You do not want to obscure that line between at the bottom of the eye lens. So let me see if I can get this to show up a little bit better. Sorry. And knock down that brightness a little bit. Is that better? I think that's a little better. Yeah. Get some of that shininess knocked down there. So you can see that a little bit better, that kind of glow that we've got going there. And that's a nice little effect. So it's just the thin down Wurm green, that second green, and just work the top of that ridge on the eye socket, on the outside of the eye socket. So it gives it that little bit of glow, that little bit of OSL kind of effect on the eyes. And especially like for iron hands, little touches like that will really help those eyes stand out. And then we just get a little bit of white. And we're going to do the dot. We're going to do the dot in the back of the eye lens. Again, bracing everything. Just moving straight in. I don't know if you can see under there very well. Let's try flipping them over. Don't know that you can see under there too well, but it's there. Kind of lost this one. Let's get that a little better defined. There we go. And again, just to make sure that we're keeping that line between perfect. There we go. That looks good. Just to make sure that we're keeping that line with the eye lens. And you can see there you're getting a little bit of that OSL from the eyes. I think that looks pretty cool. I think that looks pretty good. So now we're going to do the bolter casing. Now let's finish up the leather real quick. So for the leather, real simple. We're going to do Vallejo Model Color Black and then Vallejo Model Color Deck Tan. And the reason we're doing the Deck Tan is because we basically just want like a desaturated, de-stressed leather. We don't want it to turn brown. But we want to just really get it desaturated. And Deck Tan is a great color to have in your arsenal. I love this color. It's a really nice color to use for like bone. But it just desaturates. So this is just going to be, the first time around is just going to be like a gray, but it's going to be a warm gray. So just do a quick edge highlight. We're not doing a lot of texture with this first pass. We're just really establishing the shapes here on the first pass. And then we're going to add more Deck Tan. And this is where it's going to get a little bit more textury. And again, when we're doing these highlights, we're just tapping. Get a couple little scuffs and scratches there. Tap, 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 tap. We want this to be really irregular. We don't want this to be straight lines. Tap, 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 tap. And again, we're going to take, so we're starting to get that distressed look, distressed. a little bit more deck tan into the previous mixture. And now we're at like a really kind of dark gray tan color. And that's exactly what we want. We don't want it to be, it's not just pure gray, because pure gray is just going to look, well, gray. We want it to be that kind of off-white tannish color. And you can see we have some texture there, we have some, but it's still, we have some color, but it's a little light. It's a little too much contrast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this heavy body black from Secret Weapon, and you can use any black ink. I don't think Nuln Oil is quite strong enough because you'll see this is black. This isn't like a shade. This is a glaze. It's kind of between a shade and ink, but really it's just a very nicely pigmented black glaze. So we're going to thin that down and then go over that leather real quick. And because it's not a wash, it's a glaze, it is going to tint those highlights that we put down on the leather. So you can see there, it's darker, but it still has, it's not just gray. And that's still drying a little bit. It's not just gray. There is a little tan there. It is darker. This whole mini is dark. This is a challenge to work on camera, I have to admit. But we shall persevere. You'll see there is a little bit of gray tan sticking through that dark wash, and that's what we want. It's still black. When you look at it, it's still distressed, but let's get some more light in there. There we go. But it's dark. It looks black. It doesn't look gray, is what I'm trying to say. So we've got the eye lenses, got the leather. Now the big kahuna, that white bolter casing. There's really, unless you're like painting bolters separate and doing it all with an airbrush, there's really only one way. You just kind of have to tough it out and do white by hand, but have no fear. I have a good way to do that. That's why we're here. So first things first, Vallejo Game Color Wolf Gray. I never, ever, ever, ever just put white over black. It's just a losing effort. You're going to take like 9 coats. I always do a gray, or if I'm doing a tan white, I do a brown or a bone, and start somewhere other than white, because starting with white is just, grays are just so much better pigmented and so much easier. Like you can see, this is going right over black. I might have to adjust so you can actually see this white. The contrast is a little too much. So this is Wolf Gray from Vallejo Game Color. I love this color. It's a really nice, light, cool gray. If I have to adjust the camera when I get to the white, I will, but and making sure to go around that little aquila on the bolter. And this is just a base coat, so you want it to be even. You don't necessarily want to get in all the nooks and crannies. You want to leave some mystery, some definition, but don't sweat it. Like if you end up painting in one of those crevices, it's not the end of the world by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm trying to avoid them. If I don't avoid them, that's fine. We're going to be washing this anyway. So, excuse me. So we do not have to be filled in too much of that. So I'm just going to go back. But we do want to make sure, we do want to try not to get on the metallic elements, because then we just have to go back and repaint them, and we do not want to go back in general. So we just want to do things one time, do it well, be done with it. Do want to get the grip there. Get this part here. So we're base coating the whole, and we are taking our time with this part because this is the foundation. This is thinned down because we do want a nice even coat. So as Duncan says, 2 thin coats of this Wolfe gray and you'll be good to go. But we're really just doing this as a base coat, and then we're going to wash it and we're going to highlight it with white. So the white is going to be the main color, obviously. But you can see how well that covers over black. It would just be madness to do just a straight white. So make sure we get the front part here, front here, down there. And just be careful around the hands. Oops. So I just hit that kind of metal part protruding down there. So I'll just go back and I'll just go around and paint the whole thing white instead of repainting it metal. And that's just personal preference. I'm not particularly emotionally invested in that piece being white or metal. So just going back and painting it white to save myself some time works for me. And then getting back here, we do want to be careful. Do want to be careful that we're not getting close to the aquila, and we're not getting close to the inside of the arm like I just did there. But if we do, get your brush wet. Rub it off. And if you have to, it's always nice to have a couple Q-tips handy for in case you need to do a little bit more vigorous. And then there we go, it's gone. So like my finger, usually you see me like lick my finger and wipe it off. It's not going to get in there. I have big sausage hands, so it's not going. The finger's not going to get in there. So it's nice to have a couple Q-tips just on your desk, ready to go in case something like that happens and you need to like rub it. Like you saw the brush. The brush wasn't taking it all off, but it did help by keeping it wet. But we really needed to get that paint off because it's a total pain. Like I said, with this glazing technique, it's a pain to kind of go back and try and fix stuff like that. So we just want to be very careful when we're painting around the body, especially for an area that is not really, there's not a lot of reward. So you can see I got a little bit of white in by the scope up there, or a little bit of gray, excuse me. I already have heavy body black on my palette, so I just went back with the heavy body black and just hit the back of that scope and canceled out that gray. So instead of going back and getting Nuln Oil or getting the base color for the metallic, I just used what I had on hand, and that saved me some time, saved me some effort, and it gets a good. It solved the problem without creating more problems for myself, which is really the goal here. So make sure we have a nice even base coat on the bolter casing. And there's no two ways about it. I mean, this is just even painting this light gray that covers, like you can see, this covers really well. But even painting this over the black and metallic kind of base coat, you're going to have to go over it a couple times just to get a really nice smooth base coat on that. But it's worth spending the time now, and you'll see, because the next two steps are very, very quick. The next two steps are just the wash and highlight, and those go very quickly. So we're laying a good foundation here to save ourselves time when we move on to painting the white. So we have the eye lenses, we have the leather, we have the base coat down on the bolter casing. And now, the important part, energy. And this is the part that really makes a big difference on the final look of the white. I'm using Secret Weapon blue-black wash. This stuff is great. I don't use a lot of Secret Weapon Miniatures paints, glazes. I don't use a ton of them, but the applications I do use them for, they're perfect for what I need them to do. If that makes sense. Like they're not something I use all the time, but for certain things, especially like that heavy body black, and they also make a soft body black. Both of those are really nice to have in the arsenal. The black red is fantastic. I use that for painting faces and flesh. Amethyst is really good. So there are a few, and of course blue black. There are a few that are really exceptional. You'll see this is a nice desaturated blue. It's kind of like if you made Vallejo deep sea blue into a glaze. This is kind of the color it would be. So we thin that down with some Lamian medium because we do want it to flow a little bit. And we're going to go and wash down this whole bolter. So we just want to make sure that we have an even coat, kind of concentrating in the recesses there. Concentrating there. And this is because we didn't have to be too fine on the base coat, leaving kind of shadows and stuff, because we're going through and we're doing this blue-black, and this will define all the rivets and all those hard-to-reach areas really nicely. So now we have this kind of bluish tint to the bolter. And that's fine. We want that. We want that kind of cold contrast for our white. Because we have the green, and yes, it's kind of a warm green, but green is a cool color. So for the rest of the bolter, I'm using Vallejo Model Color White. It's a great white. And gets good coverage. And from here, we're going to start really being more selective. I'm just starting with an edge highlight on the top of the bolter just to kind of establish where those shapes are. But we're going to go in, so we hit this rivet, but we're going to go in and actually paint this thing white. And you can see we still trying to leave that blue-black in the crevices and around these elements here. So this is thinned down a little bit. I'm using the side of the brush, and I'm being pretty careful. Now I definitely don't want to get in those recesses that are now shaded. So just make sure we have a good tip on the brush. You see me making those kind of jerking motions. We're only really able to do that because it's thinned down. It's actually catching a little bit of the lamy and medium in the blue-black wash. So we want to make sure to get the sides of these little things here. Top of this, on the front side. And then I'll use the side of the brush to get the tops of these, making sure that prevents the bristles from getting down into those recesses. So I'll just use the top of the brush to hit those little elements on top of the gun. And then here, again, using the side of the brush, but here we want to be super, super careful. We don't want to leave that all blue like that, but we don't want to get back in there and ruin that nice definition that we have. So I'm almost just painting on the edge there with my brush. And get the back. And I mean, this is tricky. There's no two ways about it. Painting white is tricky. Getting a nice clean white that has some visual interest is tricky. But this is worth taking the time, because these bolter casings on these models are such a focal point, because Iron Hands is such a simple scheme, that this is really where the armor doesn't take very long, the metallics don't take very long, the leather doesn't take very long, so you really can afford to spend some time on elements that are going to stand out, like the bolter casing and like the eye lenses, is really where you want to maximize. You get the most kind of visual return on investment by spending your time on those things versus, spending a ton of time on something that just has less of an impact on the final miniature. So starting to get there. Still a little blue. Still a little rough. So you can see on the front there's still a little unevenness. So again, going back, very, very thin. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. And if you are able to paint weapons separate, you could like airbrush the weapons white, do the wash and the highlight, and then do the metallic elements. But, oh man, oops. See, I got a little bit sloppy with my brush there, and I hit between those little elements on top. I don't know what they're called, the little bumps. So you can see there on top those little bumps. I'm sure somebody will leave what they are in the comments, but so we're just going to go back and we're going to get some of that blue-black with that Lamian medium and just tap it and reestablish that differentiation there. And while we're at it, we can see we kind of lost that rivet, kind of lost that one. So there's a little back and forth here with the blue, black, and the white. So you can see we reestablished those rivets on the white there. And then we really, this is our last pass, so we really want this to be on point. That's looking pretty good. And this little piece here. Because the white is thin, that even on the front there, we just went over it in pure white. It still has that little bit of a blue hue to it. And that's because we are going back with the thin white. So you can see we're really starting to get a strong, you can really see the eye lenses nicely there. We're really starting to get a strong identity with this model, with the silver hand, the green eye lenses, the white bolter casing, really starting to get a strong identity, more than just, metallic armor and silver hands. So that's part of what, if you choose to do a simple scheme like this, you have to figure out those areas on the model that you want to develop that identity and develop that interest. Because if my go-to for bolters is black, just in general, I think it looks good on most armies. It's just a simple black bolter casing. But if we had tried to do a black bolter casing on this scheme, it would have just been really flat. Even if you're not doing iron hands, even if you're doing, your custom chapter that is also a dark metallic. Think about doing red bolter casings or yellow bolter casings or something. You see it's still a little streaky. Still a little streaky on that white. Front looks good. But we did get a little too much on top. You see on top there, on the top of the little eagle. So again, we'll grab some of that Lamy in medium. And just kind of tap to reestablish the differentiation in those elements. That was not enough. There we go. But you can see the white looking pretty good. And we'll come in the back again and just give it a thinned down white, and that's much better. That's much smoother. And there we have it. So we did the eye lenses. We got that nice green glow on the eye lenses. We did the leather. You see the leather a little bit better now. See how it has that little off-white, that little tan, but it's still distressed, and it doesn't really stand out, but it is a different element. And you'll see that particularly when we go back, because we're going to satin varnish the model. We go back and do a matte. So we have differences in paint. We have contrast in paint. We have contrast in texture, but we also have a contrast in finish. So we're always looking for those little spots to do those contrasts and get more interest without having to resort to just an extreme paint scheme or something. If we can do that by making decisions on textures and finishes and get more contrast that way, that's a great way to do it while keeping your palette limited, or keeping your palette under control. I was talking to one of my tutoring clients earlier today, and he didn't do this. He's doing Black Templars, so the palette kind of is very similar to this. But one of the things that I think trips people up a lot when doing their own schemes, or even when just plotting out a model, is editing out colors. Like different elements being different colors. They don't always need to be a different color. They can be a different texture, or they can be a different finish. That's another way to get differentiation without having to change colors all the time and put a bunch of colors on the model. So that's all for part 3 of the tutorial series. I think that looks pretty good. And let's zoom out and see it kind of from afar. There we go. Yeah, I think that looks pretty strong. I think that's a pretty strong look for Iron Hands. And then when we come back next time, we're going to do the transfers and the oil wash. And after that, and then the varnish, pop them on a base. So part 4 will probably be next week, and we'll finish this guy up. So thank you. If you have any questions, as always, leave them in the comments. And look forward to the next one.